A former friend of Lori Daybell's took the stand. Her name is Audrey. And let me tell you what, she cleared the room with her testimony, and we're going to talk about the highlights of it in today's video. Hello Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the sofa, which is right behind me, and our mascot Roscoe is actually in my arms today instead of the sofa because he's a needy little boy and I'm totally here for it. My name is Paul, and today we're going to be talking about, just like I said in my little opener, we're going to talk about a former friend. I don't even know if you would call her a friend right after her testimony, but a former acquaintance, let's say, of Lori Daybell's. She took the stand, and towards the end of this testimony, I mean, y'all, she dropped some bombshells. Now, I want to play some of the highlights. If you're new to the channel, what we do is we typically will listen or look at some clips, and we'll use those as talking points and that type thing. Again, these are just my opinions. I am not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not any of that stuff, so this is like entertainment, my opinions, that type thing. I urge you to do your own research, come to your own opinions and conclusions, and drop them in the comments below. So that's what we're going to do. Now, also, let me say this before we jump in. Okay, so when this was going down, and before I listened to the actual testimony, and I was just like reading tweets and comments and stuff, and I was like, I don't know if I believe this or not. You know what I'm saying? Because I was like, yeah, why did she come out with this? So after I listened to it, it gave me a completely different context of, oh, okay, I get this now. And so we'll talk about more of that towards the end of it once we get into the bombshell stuff or whatever. So that's it. Let's go ahead and put that first clip up and give it a listen.
Do you recall who else visited with her and you?
Zulema was there, and Melanie Gibb, and there was some other women that I didn't know.
And what did Lori talk about at that time?
I don't remember what was talked about, but at the end of being there, she brought up wanting to work on her husband at the time.
Okay, and do you know who her husband at the time was?
Charles.
Okay, so now what Audrey's describing is some of these like gatherings and whatnot that Lori would have, and she'll talk about the different places she went, like traveling with them and whatnot. One thing to keep in mind that I was like, this is like really painting a picture for me, is when we listen to Audrey's reaction to the zombie stuff and like what she's talking about here, where they're going to do this, stuff with Charles and whatnot, and her reaction is like, I don't feel comfortable with this or whatever. Look at the other names that she's brought up, Zulema and Melanie Gibb, and look at how much deeper they were into it. Now, I'm not trying to say anything, but it's just interesting where you hear certain people, like April Raymond, this Audrey, who are just like, yeah, girl, I'm good. You know what I'm saying? And other people who kind of rode it all the way out almost to the finish line. I just think that is intriguing.
At some point, did you go back to her hotel room?
Yes, that's where she brought it up.
Okay. So when you say that she wanted to work on her husband, Charles, what does that mean?
Do you want me to back up a little bit?
Sure.
So at some time close to that time, when I had seen her again after not seeing her for a long time, she all of a sudden, out of the blue, brought up all of this stuff about zombies and people being possessed is kind of the idea of that. And I hadn't heard of that before and had no basis for that. And that's why she brought that up in the hotel room, because that was something she was doing herself.
Okay, so this is what I'm talking about, where she's like, zombie, I had no basis for this. And again, I just put this clip in there and some of these ones referring to this because I just think it's interesting to hear from different perspectives of people who were around Lori with different, relationships and that type thing. And to hear how they reacted to this talk, because I think one thing that was prevalent with Lori and Chad and this group or whatever is that they were starting off as like whatever say the baseline religion is, of the LDS or whatever it is. And then it was almost like they were picking people from the church, from the people they knew, to see who they could get to go along with like this out there stuff. You know what I'm saying? It was like way off from the teachings of what the actual religion is. And whoever they could find, it was like, okay, cool, you're in, right? And whoever they couldn't, it was okay, well, they kind of went by the wayside or honestly ended up dead, you know, from the looks of it. So I just think that's an interesting perspective. And again, Miss Raymond, Audrey here, you know, they kind of had this perspective that was intriguing to me because they were just like, what do you like, what? You know, almost like this is like blasphemous, right? Like, what are you talking about type thing? And again, it's just interesting to see who kind of called her out on that and who didn't.
And then she asked my thoughts about it, and I said I didn't have a basis for it, and that it made me feel uncomfortable. But she was basically alluding to people, the term, I guess, that eventually she called it was zombies, and that it was people being possessed or having a spirit like connected to them or something.
I mean, can you imagine, you know, regardless of whatever your beliefs are or anything like that, like you switch it around to some kind of different context or whatever, where you're sitting there and someone brings up this stuff to you and you're like, okay, you know, and like someone that you know, right? Now, again, oftentimes we see in this case where people might not have known each other that well, which makes it even more bizarre. Because again, that would have just been much easier to be like, yeah, bye. But I'm like, okay, so imagine someone you've known for many years that all of a sudden is talking about this zombies and this and that, and you're almost like, you know, hello, you in there still? You know, kind of a thing. And so I'm sure for Audrey, when this started coming out, she was like, what?
Like work on trying to get a negative spirit out of Charles. And, but actually, I should say, at first it was just like everyone started holding hands, and I didn't know what they were doing. And I thought maybe there was going to be like a group prayer or something. And so they all held hands, and I joined hands as well, thinking it was going to be a prayer. And then she started talking, basically to say that she was going to try to get a spirit out of Charles. And each woman would say something. And then...
So what do you recall Lori saying?
I don't remember exact words, but things like knives and fire and like weapons that you would try to use to... that kind of an idea.
Okay. And when you were holding hands with this woman, were you standing, sitting? How were you guys?
Sitting.
Sitting in the room. Okay.
I mean, every time I listen to the stuff like this, when people recount these situations, to me, it just reminds me like a bunch of teenagers with their first Ouija board at a spend the night. You know what I'm saying? Like, literally, like, what's that movie, Witchcraft? Remember that? Like, something like that, right? Where you're just like, and like her, like, I thought we were going to do a prayer. And I'm like, oh, if only it could have been that.
And do you know who Tammy was married to at the time that you met her?
She was married to Chad.
Did Chad ever say anything to you about Tammy?
Yes. During the course of the friendship, he said that he had had a near-death experience years before, and that he had been told by a deceased relative that Tammy would pass away before she turned 50.
Here's my thing. How many people did this man tell that his wife was going to die, right? I mean, it was like he was announcing it. I mean, almost like in conversation with somebody at the convenience store. You know, I'm just like, my God, everyone has the same story. But again, I hope that at least this point, silver lining, because of that, it can help get convictions.
Do you recall when he told you this?
I would say around the end of January 2019 or in February 2019.
Okay. And at some point, did he indicate to you that he felt he would get married again?
Yes, he did.
Did he tell you who he would marry?
He didn't tell me for a while, but then eventually he said Lori.
Okay.
Again, part of me sits here and thinks this, where I'm like, It was like he was lining it up almost like this. Like, how long had he been planning this? Had he been planning this before Lori? You know what I mean? Because it's almost like he was, by going out and telling people and doing this and this is going to happen and blah, 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 blah. It was almost like he was laying the foundation, if you will, like a long time before, but really ramped it up when Lori came into the picture. And again, I mean, can you imagine going out and telling everyone you run into, oh, yeah, my current wife's going to die before she's 50 and I'm going to end up running off with this thing right over here. I mean, who does that?
And then basically she brought up the idea of working on Tammy.
Okay. And again, when you say working on, what did you guys do?
She said that Tammy had a spirit that was in her and needed to be taken out. And I told her I did not want to help and that I did not want to participate. And she sorry.
It's okay. If you need to get some water.
Now, I wanted to leave that long pause in there just for the emotional impact, to be quite honest, because I think that this is when this brings it home. And these are the type things for the testimony that when I was listening to it, I was like, this is something I would expect of someone who's in shock and disbelief and who is saddened over what happened. Because again, even though it's like, she's like, okay, they were doing this thing, you know, we're going to do this thing with Tammy and it's kind of weird, whatever, you know, knowing what happened now, I just can't imagine that realization of being like, whoa, wait a minute, like this, they took it to this level. I mean, I can't imagine.
She highly pressured me, saying, you're supposed to be my friend, you're supposed to help me, like Chad asked you to be my friend. And I reiterated that I didn't want to. And she kept on, and this was later in the night. And I didn't know, I didn't do those things in my own life. And I said that I would say a prayer.
Now, this whole thing she's talking about of, Lori put pressure on me, you're supposed to be my friend, Chad asked you to be my friend. This is the parts where I was like, oh, wait a minute. You know how I said earlier in the video where I was like, before I heard the actual testimony, I was like, I don't know if I believe this. Why would she say this? This is very believable to me. This sounds very much like Lori. This level of manipulation, because oftentimes we see, and again, I'm just speaking from my perspective of watching like a ton of documentaries on cults and being in the true crime world like we are, how often do we see this level of manipulation in situations like this, right? Where they're like wearing you down, manipulating you, guilt tripping you, this type thing. And these type things seem to be what Lori does. It seems to be what she's probably done her whole life. I mean, imagine the conversations that she had with Alex trying to get him to do stuff. We're not talking about the most recent stuff. I mean, we can talk about that too. But I'm talking about like before. He probably was always her little puppy dog, right? So hearing Audrey describe this stuff and the level of emotion and upsetness, it makes it very believable to me.
When Lori and Melanie visited you in Missouri, did you do any other work other than on Tammy?
No.
And where did Lori say Tammy's spirit was?
She was saying that she was in a cage or a jail or something like this. And it was the idea like she needs to be freed and helped because some person's overtaken her body.
Okay.
Now, what's ironic about this is that literally it's almost like Lori's describing what happened to her, right? Because it's just like some evilness took over, because you listen to these people talk about how she has this wonderful mother and this and that and blah, 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 you know. But what I read into this is Tammy was in Lori's way. That's all that was. That's all these victims were. They were in her way. They were in Chad's way. And they had to come up with some reasoning to get rid of them. Now, also this line of thinking where she's like, she's in this cage and we have to like free her. I think that that was the reasoning that Lori uses and probably still uses, where she's like, no, JJ and Tylee and all these people, we freed them. We did them a favor. I can almost guarantee you that's how Lori justifies this in her twisted mind.
When I heard Chad Daybell say, something to the effect of, why is the body still alive, or something like that,
Okay.
I realized that they must have a different idea.
Okay.
Even further.
Even further. And what did that mean?
That they didn't intend for the person to be helped, I would think. That they didn't want the person to live.
Now, again, this makes total sense to me, and seeing the evidence that we've seen of how Chad and Lori operated with these, groups, and we're doing this work on these people. But again, hearing her say this then makes me kind of side-eye some of the other people that have taken the stand talking about, I didn't know any of this stuff was going on and all this, because I'm like, it didn't take too much for people like her, April, to put two and two together, right? So what's everyone else's excuse? Now, let's listen to a couple of clips. Well, let's listen to one clip once the defense questions her. Then we'll flip back to the state and then back to the defense.
And that's what a friend does, is you wanted to help your friends, right?
Until I didn't think they were friends.
Yeah. And that's why you went to the Rexburg Temple in Idaho with Chad and Lori and Melanie. It's because they were your friends, right?
They asked me if I wanted to go anywhere, and I said I wanted to go to the temple.
And the temple is a place where you can worship God.
Yes.
And be with your friends.
To serve others.
Yeah.
Now, he was not going to let that friend thing go. And one of the things he's trying to stress in, cross-examination, all this type stuff, is, okay, well, you got together with these people multiple times. So if, did you ever call the police? Did you ever, contact the church? Did you ever do this stuff? A lot of the same type logic that we've seen used on these witnesses, Melanie, Zulema, people like that I'm talking about. Well, if this is so this and that, well, why didn't you do this? Which kind of was a question, like a legit question along the way. I get that questioning. Well, what he's doing here with her is really going in for the, you were friends, you were this, you were that, why didn't you do this? That type situation. And previously, I've sat here and looked at it and thought about it and watched this case happen over the years and whatnot. And, I sit here and compare like her testimony to that of like Zulema or Melanie Gibb. And this is where like for all people like Audrey, people like April who were like, not feeling it, they backed out. They were like, this is not a cute look. Oftentimes, though, again, I'll go back to the cult stuff and whatnot, where if you're in a situation, like I'm trying to imagine myself in this situation where she's like, well, I thought we were going to do a group prayer, and I was like, I basically, until I felt like I'm in danger, right? I don't fault her for those moments, because I can see where you're kind of wanting to not make waves, not go along. And I think what Lori and Chad did is they picked people that they felt that they could basically manipulate, right? Some people more so than others. Some people like, Zulema and Melanie Gibb seem to really just get knee deep in this stuff, right? Where someone like this lady, experimented around what was going along, and okay, well, here's this. But then when it got to be like, oh, wait a minute, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? She was like, I'm dipping. And of course, we're going to hear in a moment what happens when you do that to Lori and them, because again, I do feel like a lot of these people who got too involved with them ended up losing their lives. I still 100% am convinced if Zulema, if Melanie Gibb, if Audrey, if April, any of the people that stuck with Lori and Chad in the thick of it would eventually lose their lives. Especially, we saw what happened to Alex, right? Zulema and Melanie Gibb, because they were so deep in the trenches with the whole situation, they're lucky to be alive, honestly.
What threats did she make to you?
Your Honor, I think this is outside.
She threatened
the
to
scope
kill
of
me.
I'd object.
Hold on just a minute. It came up on cross-examination, so it's within the scope of cross and proper redirect. Ms. Rawlings, you can re-ask the question.
What's the time and place of this conversation?
And I think, Audrey, you indicated this was when defense counsel asked you why you ended the friendship, and that was in what month?
In October 2019.
Well, first of all, timing-wise, lucky she got out around then, right? Because, I mean, look at the time of this. Secondly, the defense is over there just punching air, right? That this got brought into it. And the judge is like, well, this got brought up in this. And, he was just like, oh my, because this is not a good look for Lori.
And I think, they were working on their own doing those things.
Yeah. I think defense counsel kind of asked you about this friendship and why you terminated it, and you said that you were scared or in fear. Why was that?
Because of a conversation.
And who was the conversation with?
Lori.
Okay, now this part right here, so this is what kicks it off, right? And here's my thing. I mean, brave on her for being like, hey, look, you know what? Now, again, this sounds like something authentic that I could see someone in this, relationship, group, whatever you want to call it, do. Where she prayed on it. She's like, this isn't right, and I'm going to have to speak this truth and tell her, girl, it's a wrap.
Okay.
Yes, I had already made plans to leave because I had prayed about it and it felt like I needed to leave and end the friendship. And I was leaving early the next morning. And Lori and I were the only ones in the hall in her place at the time. And I told her that I was going to go upstairs and pack my bag and just go to bed early because I didn't want to spend more time with her.
Okay, now we're getting into like the whole thing of where she's just putting Lori out there on Front Street. Now, one thing to think back to is if you've been following this case and remember the pre-recorded phone call that Melanie Gibb placed to Lori and Chad when she was like, okay, wait, what's going on here? And she turns that in or whatever. Lori knows she's being recorded, right? If you think back to the tone of Lori when essentially Melanie is having this, putting her foot down and like, okay, I'm calling this out. Look at how Lori spoke to her knowing she was recorded. Imagine Lori having a conversation where she's being abandoned, someone's, questioning her, and she knows she's not being recorded. And these things that she's saying, laughing at her like it's hilarious, you're so naive, everything's not unicorns, all this. I can 100% see Lori saying these things and doing these things. Now, here's the thing. Was I there? No. Okay, these are just my opinions. So I could be completely wrong. I'm not trying to sit here and say I'm the be-all, know-all, right? It's just my opinion. I can just see Lori saying this kind of stuff. So let's keep going.
And as I went to go and do that, I asked her the question, is there anything weird going on that I don't know about? And she said, no. What do you mean? And I said, I don't know anything. And she said, no. So I took her to her word because I'm a trusting person. And as soon as I turned to start to go up the stairs, She started laughing, the kind of laugh as if you're laughing at someone or think something's hilarious. And she said to me, "You're so naive and too trusting. You're like a little child. You'll believe anything anyone would tell you."
Again, this sounds like the evil that lurks behind the mask, right? Coming out, showing its true face.
And she said, "You think the world is all unicorns and rainbows. You go around helping people and serving them. Well, I've got news for you. Not everyone's a good person. And not everyone can afford to be so nice and kind."
Now, again, completely on brand, right? I think Lori enjoyed and got off on that power. Even though she probably wasn't announcing it, in this little weird world that she moved in, I think she got off on that. She liked playing God. She liked being in charge of others' outcomes, their fate, that type thing.
Did she say how?
Yes. She said that she would cut me up. And something about that she wasn't in the mental place to do that, but that she would get herself in that place to be able to do it. But that she didn't want to have to because it'd be so messy and there'd be so much blood. And then bleach and something about trash bags. And that she would bury me where no one would ever find me.
Okay.
Okay, that whole comment about I'm not in the frame of mind, but I'll get in the frame of mind, that is something I'm like, I can just hear the words coming out of her mouth, right? And saying something to the effect of that. Now, this part also it does sound very explosive, right? I mean, it's over the top. Now, does that mean that I don't think that this happened or whatever? No. I definitely think this conversation happened. I think that Lori lets some people see this. It's like again, I think she enjoyed this. I think she got off on it. And again, some of these things just sound so much like what I would imagine Lori saying. Now, again, I wasn't there, so I don't have proof of any of this, right? Except just listening to what this lady is saying. And then I guess I would ask myself the question, why would she make it up? You know what I mean? Like, and we'll talk about some of where I play the fence and do devil's advocate on it in just a minute.
I don't think I have any other questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Rawlings.
Request
You may, Mr. Archibald.
So this diabolical conversation that you're having with Lori in October of 2019, was this in Idaho?
Yes.
You'd been with her previously in October of 2019 in Missouri, right?
Yes.
You'd been with Lori previously in October of 2019 in Hawaii, right?
Yes.
And then you followed Lori from Hawaii to Idaho in October of 2019, right?
Yes.
And then you decide it's time to go home to Missouri.
I'm sorry. I didn't follow her. I did not follow Lori.
Okay. You just happened to go from one state where you were vacationing with her to her place where she lived.
Okay, now that part where she was like, I'm sorry, I didn't follow Lori. And I mean, good for her for calling that out, right? Because there is like this whole difference of being like, wait, listen. And one thing I think with Audrey that comes up during this is I think that she sounds like someone who was of her faith, I believe the LDS is, or faith or whatever. And so she wants to make this distinct difference of like, look, I wasn't down for this zombie talk and this murder. Are you crazy? You know what I mean? No, she's not saying it in those terms. That's sofa talk. Okay, that's sofa talk. Now, also, of course, the defense is going to get up here and try and poke holes in this. I mean, this is horrifying testimony for his client, right? And now he does bring up a good point, which I talked about earlier, where it's like, well, hold up. So you were following them around, and she corrects him on the word follow, but you're going here, you're going there. If you felt this way, why would you get back together, type thing? And it's a valid point, right? That I think anybody would question, like, well, why are you, why not just do this or that? And that's where I really believe that one thing that Lori and Chad did with people is, again, this level of manipulation. And I think that in the beginning, like when people were just, starting to meet them and whatnot, they were presenting this kind of like, oh, hey, da 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 da, and sprinkling in this bizarre stuff, right? Now, again, why would I not go do this or that? Well, she says, you know what? I was a trusting person, and specifically on one of these trips, I didn't want Melanie to be alone. Talking about Melanie Boudreau, she was, going through a rough time, whatever, and so I flew back to wherever with her. And I believe that's all authentic, because one thing that I have seen is with the, the group or whatever you want to call them, the people, is they are very big on wanting to, I don't know if you call it help somebody, or like, oh, you're not doing well, let me whatever, get all up in it or whatever. Now, I'm not speaking to all of them, because clearly some of their versions of helping was taking lives and whatnot, but I believe Audrey is what I'm trying to say. I believe she was being nice to Melanie, and she might have been like, what, this seems like, I don't really know all these people 100%. So essentially what I'm trying to say is I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt. Okay, now let's listen to one more clip, and then we'll kind of round out my thoughts on it.
No, I knew nothing about her children.
Right. Did she say, I killed Charles and I'll kill you too?
She didn't talk about Charles.
Nothing like that, right?
She brought up being at the scene, watching someone take their last breaths.
And you have previously testified under oath, swearing an oath that you'll tell the truth. You have previously testified at a grand jury hearing. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Do you remember taking an oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Do you remember that?
Yes.
And do you remember your testimony that you did not say anything like this?
I was scared, and she had said that if you ever tell anyone, I'll come and find you in the dark of night.
Okay, now, here's my thing with this. Yes, I question why didn't you bring this up in the grand jury thing, because I would have been scared to have not have brought that up, right? So, valid point. Valid point. But then when she says, Lori said that she would come find me in the dark of night, I mean, I'm sorry, I probably would have given some, weight to that, right? I would have believed that. So I can see where that might also be like, oh, okay. So plain devil's advocate here on this. This could have been something where she goes to the grand jury and she's like, you know what? I'm going to say A, B, C, and D, but I'm kind of afraid for my life and don't want to get all up in it, not knowing that this was going to blow up into the massive case that it was, right? And so I can see that totally playing out that way and not coming forth with that, and then getting up to the finish line of, oh my God, we're going to trial. It's been years. This is what's going to happen. Like, I need to speak my truth type thing. And also, I now feel safe. The people I was afraid of are behind bars. They can't hurt me anymore. I can speak my truth. Now, on the flip side of it, I can understand where this would be a major point that the defense would bring up, right? This makes total sense to bring this up, like, girl, we should have definitely told this. You said you would have, not gonna lie, do all this kind of stuff. At the end of the day, only her and Lori will ever know what is true with what she said, right? Now, me as a juror, listening to this, I would have to basically make the testimony like a moot point. Because of the fact that it wasn't brought up earlier, for me, it would be like this, like, okay, yep, check, got it, but we're putting it over here for right now, type thing. We're just going to set it to the side, because I would have already honestly formed several opinions on Lori with what I had heard, right? This is why I would not be a good juror on these kind of cases. I would have been like, oh, yeah, girl, you're guilty. Let's wrap it up here. So, just playing devil's advocate, I'm like, yeah, I get it. I mean, this could be testimony that doesn't really have that big of an impact because people are going to very, very much be like, I'm not 100% buying it. She didn't bring this up in the grand jury, and now she's bringing it up. This kind of affects her credibility. But on the same note, it's like, what? She probably was scared for her life. She probably was afraid of these things. She was seeing all this stuff happen and these people all dying around these two. I mean, I would have been scared.
What was your question?
You want the jury to believe that you just didn't make this last crap up.
I did not make it up.
But you acknowledge that you did not say this when you previously testified in support of probable cause, right?
Yes. Chad
Okay.
and Lori.
Thank you.
And he ends on that note. He had to get that dig in. That was a dramatic, you want the jury to believe you didn't just make this crap up. Now, again, I would ask, why would you make something like that up, right? I mean, obviously the answer to that would be like, well, because she wants to help get a conviction. And I mean, I get that, right? Why would you get on the stand and just make that up? I would be more afraid to do that. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, I do believe what she's saying. I can see Lori saying these things. I think it was, I think it was, I don't want to say a bad call or bad judgment because I didn't walk in her shoes. I didn't know, and if I did, I could see I probably would have been scared too and whatnot. But it's probably going to lessen the impact of the testimony just simply because of how it played out. That being said, I think it was a snapshot into how evil Lori really is. And of course, the defense team is not going to want people to see this. They don't want to hear things like this. Of course, he's going to say stuff like, well, she never said, I killed my husband, I'll kill you too. I don't think Lori's going to say something like that. I don't think she's going to admit to something like that. I think she's going to be someone to make threats the way she does. I mean, you hear the way she talks to Melanie Gibb, her son, like all these people. She's so condescending and nasty. And these are on calls that she knows she's recorded. So of course, if somebody kind of turned their back on her, oh, I'll bet you she had some vile things to say to them. So that's it. Let me know. Did you believe this testimony or not? That's my biggest question for y'all, right? Because reading comment sections, so many people were mixed on it. And so I'm just curious, do you believe her? So that's it. Let's have a nice discussion, a nice friendly discussion down below. And until we meet back again with, my Coke Zero here, I'll see y'all soon.